Welcome to the Darkstream, Voxday, voxday.blogspot.com, and unauthorized.tv. Well, I don't know about you, but I am looking forward to hearing how Owen's tour goes. I think the sound is working, so if it's not, let me know. Hello, everybody. And sorry about the late notification and so forth. Been a busy day, but it's all good, and we're all here now. So the topic is a little bit heavy, but we'll get to that in a minute. A couple things just to address. Somebody asked how they can become a channel member, which is different than being an unauthorized subscriber. A channel member is where you click join. You have to be logged into Google and click join, and then you'll be able to choose one of the three options. It's one way for you to get notifications directly from me, but you don't need to sign up to do it. Any unauthorized subscriber can get these notifications as well. I owe you guys two book reviews. I haven't forgotten about that. The thing I'm struggling with a bit is when to do them. So I think what I'm going to do is send an email out to the gold members and ask them when they want to do it. When's a good time, because I'm not necessarily crazy about the idea of canceling canceling the Darkstream, the regular Darkstream, for the book reviews, but I'm not afraid to. If that's what you guys want to do, if this time works best for you, that's fine. But let me know. If you're a gold member, a gold channel member, just tell me your opinion. I can probably do one earlier in the day, either on a Saturday or Sunday. So, and I guess that's pretty much it for the channel business, other than this is the last day that you can order the Owen Benjamin You're Doing Great Kid Fall 2019 Tour Support t-shirt. And if you want to do that, go to arkhavencomics.com. I'm going to leave those up until the time that the tour begins, and then we'll take them down. So you have a little bit of time if you want to grab one of those. So book stream on Finnegan's Wake. Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. I am not a James Joyce fan. So, but let's talk about the subject matter now. And it's a fairly provocative statement, I understand. I'm flat out saying that conservatism is intrinsically non-Christian. It's not necessarily anti-Christian, but it is without question non-Christian. Yeah, we'll take out this guy. I always find it funny when people say things like, "Oh, you don't look like you've done manual work." I haven't done manual work, except like once. I actually worked for several weekends roofing U.S. Air Force barracks in Japan. my hands are almost amazingly soft, disturbingly soft. On the other hand, I'm a proven contact fighter, and I can probably physically beat down pretty much any male between the ages of 15 and up who is under 250 pounds. So, work doesn't make you tough. I respect people who do manual work. I have no problem with people who do manual work, but there's absolutely no correlation between people who do manual work and people who actually are trained how to fight. So, but enough about that. Let's talk about Christianity and conservatism. What does conservatism mean? Well, first of all, let's look at the obvious. How long has Christianity been around? It's been around since roughly 33 AD or so. Welcome, Sean Paul Corcoran. And conservatism has been around, modern conservatism, what we call as conservatism, the American form of it, has been around since the early 20th century. So right there we know there is nothing that necessarily relates conservatism to Christianity. Christianity has been around much longer. Conservatism was not around for most of Christian history. It wasn't even around for most of Western civilization, of which Christianity was a major component. But let's not use, any crazy definitions of conservatism. Let's look at the way it was defined by Russell Kirk. And this is a little section that I'm going to read from my book, Conservative. Now, just so you understand, at the time that I wrote this, I was under the impression that conservatism was a false form of conservatism. What I have concluded in the 4 years since is that conservatism is better understood as a form of conservatism. And so let me read you this little section here. In the early 1950s, actually here, let me go back a little bit further. Contrary to decades of left-wing efforts to equate the American center right with the European far right, conservatism emerged from, and still pays a certain lip service to, distinctly Anglo-American cultural values of moderate religious conservatism combined with disparate elements of social and economic libertarianism. In its current form, it is not a very old movement. Its roots are largely in the post-World War II era, and the specific policies it advocates have gradually changed over the years. Just as liberal in the United States came to mean something close to the opposite of its classical sense, so too conservative now means something very different than it once did. In the early 1950s, the dominant political ideology in the United States was center-left liberalism, itself a reaction to the excesses of the socialist, totalitarian, eugenics-loving progressive movement. That today's SJWs have re-embraced the progressive label is no accident and would be material enough for a book of its own. We have no plans to write such a book, though, since Jonah Goldberg's liberal fascism provides a reasonable description of both the historical antecedent as well as the modern neo-progressive. With the onset of the Cold War and the embarrassing revelations of the real conditions of life under socialist rule, the American left found itself going through one of its inevitable crises of confidence. Into that void stepped a small group of intellectuals who set out to remake the even more shattered and demoralized American right. The older right, though sometimes described as paleoconservative by modern writers, actually had no such singular identity at the time. Unlike the United Kingdom, in the United States the word conservative had not been regularly applied to any political party, particular political party or tradition. At most, it could be said that the older strains of thought shared a common Anglo-Saxon skepticism of centralized power and a particularly American suspicion of elites, foreign and domestic. But none of these intellectual strains were of any serious political influence in the mid-20th century. The early new rightists were interested in discerning the deeper roots of historical American political thought and in turning its various strains into a viable, coherent political system. Some of them looked so deeply that they found inspiration from decidedly non-American sources, such as British conservative political thought. The latter was a generally elitist tradition, openly contemptuous of American-style independent citizenry and the freewheeling style of American political discourse. Among the leaders of this Anglophile camp was Russell Kirk. Now, Russell Kirk is very, very important here. Russell Kirk is the one who essentially defines the modern American conservative. His most famous work, The Conservative Mind, proved to be quickly and profoundly influential after its publication in 1953. Kirk's books synthesized various ideas from diverse 18th and 19th century thinkers, most prominently Edmund Burke, into 6 canons, or principles, of this new conservatism. So this is the core of conservatism. This is the foundation of it. Number 1, belief in a transcendent order or body of natural law which rules society as well as conscience. Now, interestingly enough, this is the only principle that even has anything to do with religion at all. Number 2, affection for the proliferating variety and mystery of human existence as opposed to the narrowing uniformity, egalitarianism, and utilitarian aims of most radical systems. 3, conviction that civilized society requires orders and classes as against the notion of classless society. 4, persuasion that freedom is closely linked. 5, custom, convention, and old prescription are checks upon both man's anarchic impulse and upon the innovator's lust for power. And 6, recognition that change may not be salutary reform, hasty innovation may be a devouring conflagration rather than a torch of progress. Society must alter, for prudent change is the means of social preservation, but a statesman must take providence into his calculations. What does this have to do with Christianity? Nothing. Some of it is actually directly opposite to what Jesus Christ teaches. If you are persuaded that freedom and property are closely linked, then the idea that the truth will set you free is irrelevant. The idea that being rich makes it harder for you to enter into the kingdom of heaven is at best orthogonal to these principles. But it gets worse. This is the historic foundation of modern conservatism. Maniac Bear's right. It's all lords and ladies nonsense. It's almost oligarchical. It's very Channel 2, PBS, Downton Abbey, faux aristocracy. This isn't evil. there's nothing intrinsically evil about this, but there's nothing good about it either. That's not fair. There's very little that's good about it, but the main thing that it's important to understand is that it's fundamentally useless. This is why conservatives like George Will, like the Republican establishment, this is why they're totally impotent. What can you do with these quote-unquote principles? I noted as a set of ideas, they're not particularly systematic. They're arguably more a set of generalized assertions and attitudes rather than principles per se. They do represent a particular worldview, but not the worldview of the Founding Fathers or of the early American political generations of the right. Several of these principles are primarily defined by that which they oppose, which is the left liberal viewpoint of the mid-20th century. So from their very beginning, the principles of conservatism were subordinate and defensive in nature. They are submissive and passive-aggressive in their relation to the left. There's nothing about American history here. There's nothing about the American Revolution. There's nothing about Christianity, about the foundations of the West, the European nations. All of it is just basically a posture. It's basically a pose. To call it lukewarm is probably to give it too much credit. Now look at what the British tradition of conservatism says. And this is very recent. This is on the blog today. And this was the former British Prime Minister and the former Conservative Party leader, John Major, who is explaining why the true conservative position is subordination to the European Union. He said, "Most conservatives are not a Brexit Party tribute band, nor have we abandoned our core values to find compromise, seek allies, and strive for unity rather than division and disarray." Now, there's two ways to interpret that. One is that the core values are to find compromise, to seek allies, and strive for unity. Or you could argue that he's saying that there are other core values that they are not willing to abandon in order to find compromise, seek allies, and strive for unity. So there's two ways that you can potentially interpret that. But the problem with the second interpretation is, number one, what are those core values? They're claiming that in their attempts to find compromise, seek allies, and strive for unity, they haven't abandoned these core values. They're saying it's okay for us to find compromise, seek allies, and strive for unity because doing so doesn't prevent us from maintaining our core values. Okay, what are these core values? We don't know. However, the further difficulty in insisting in that more innocuous second definition is we abhor the language of division and hate, and words such as saboteur, traitor, enemy, surrender, betrayal have no place in our party, our politics, nor in our society. In other words, it's very clear that their core values are to find compromise. And if you look at the actual history of the Conservative Party, and you look at the actual traditions of the Conservative Party, that is actually their principle. Their core principle is the big tent. Their core principle is deal making, which means they don't have any actual principles that mean anything. Everything is all about the tactics. And that's why there's no room, there's no place in their party for an enemy. There's no place in their politics for surrender or even betrayal. Well, if it's not possible to have an enemy, if it's not possible for there to be any betrayal, then that necessarily means there's nothing to betray. There's no natural enemy. There's no enemy by definition because there's nothing there. It's all about posturing. It's all about position. And that's why you can see that the American version of conservatism is actually very similar to the British tradition from which it sprang. And, the Conservative Party has been around for a long, long time precisely because it doesn't actually stand for anything. It doesn't even stand for something as simple and basic as the sovereignty of the English nation. Or it doesn't even stand for the sovereignty of the Union of Great Britain, of England and Scotland. And so once you realize that, you realize why conservatism is intrinsically doomed to failure in the sense of ever accomplishing anything meaningful. Yeah, Sam is right. They have no position if there's no enemy. What this represents is politics as conversation rather than as it was famously described by Clausewitz, politics as war. And so, this is why I've never described myself. I've never ever described myself as a conservative, despite the fact that they used to actually call me one of the top 50 conservatives on the internet back in the day. It's kind of crazy. When was that? I was listed, I was repeatedly listed as one of the top libertarian sites, but I actually made at least one or two top conservative sites. It was like either top 100 or top 50, I can't remember. And I said at the time, I'm not a conservative. Absolutely, I'm not a conservative because I have principles beyond compromising. Yeah, actually, it was back in 2010. The Right Wing News had Vox Populi at number 16 on the list of best conservative blogs. It was number 16 on the 40 best conservative blogs. And I said, I'm flattered, of course, but just a little confused, given my decidedly non-conservative views on a whole panoply of political issues. Although perhaps this is a sign that conservatives are moving in a more libertarian direction after that whole experiment in big government conservatism didn't work out so well. Think about it. The mere fact that they could have big government conservatism demonstrates that there was no real foundation there. What was really interesting is in 2017, Kurt Schlichter. So, no, I'm not a libertarian. I'm a Christian nationalist. And so, this is why conservatism cannot, will not, and is totally unable to ever effect change. It can win elections. Nobody ever said it's impossible for them to win elections. But winning elections on behalf of conservatives is irrelevant because they're not going to make any changes. They're not going to modify anything. Because their whole purpose is to make compromises. Is the idea of American nationalism valid? Um, Conceptually, yes. Realistically, it's difficult because of the civic nationalism. Welcome, Tiverton Bear. And so, would you call Pat Buchanan a Christian nationalist? I would actually call him a Catholic nationalist. I think that he is a Christian national. I think he is a Christian, but he is heavily influenced by his Catholicism. And don't get me wrong, Pat Buchanan is one of the absolute best and most relevant political commentators in the United States. I'm not criticizing him in any way, shape, or form. But this is why calling yourself a conservative is a mistake. Calling yourself a conservative is demonstrating that you have no real principles. I wouldn't say that conservatism is a form of liberalism per se. Liberals actually have goals and principles. Conservatives just compromise with them. Welcome, Hall Long Bear, or Hall Long Honey Bear Panda, if that's correct. But the important thing to understand is that conservatives are not a failed form of conservative. Conservatives are the naked conservative. And this is difficult for a lot of people to accept. I understand that. I absolutely understand that. But you're not going to get anywhere as long as you allow that to be your primary political identity. So, all right, let's go into some super chats here. Actually, Garen Bears is very relevant. Vox, I've always considered myself a conservative because I have views too extreme to be libertarian. So I'm a religious nationalist. Yes, if you're assuming you're religious, I'm okay with that. Well, you should be. Absolutely. All right. So first of all, Virgil Hiltz says peace. Anthony Sterniolo says had to catch the last stream on podcast. Posthumous comedy. Vox, I hate to break it to you, but you are extremely funny. Well, I have personally felt for most of my life that some of the thoughts that strike me are funny, but for most of my life, I have found that when I share those thoughts, people very seldom share my perspective on it. So perhaps being around Owen Benjamin has helped me learn how to express those thoughts in a way that is more palatable or more humorous to people. I don't know. But M. Bolster sends $2. Thank you. Marie Goulet says Mark P. stole his own bike and sold it for white guy crack roadblocks. Okay. Is self-hatred sufficient for gamitude? No. Certainly there's plenty of self-hating gamma or self-hating omegas, plenty of self-hating lambdas. I would argue that there's plenty of sigmas that go through periods of self-hatred, or at least extreme guilt. Alphas don't hate themselves. Alphas think they're awesome. Bravos too don't, and Delta. No, it's the main thing. The main thing about gammas is that they feel fundamentally unappreciated by everybody. They don't hate themselves so much as they are upset at their inability to be awarded the status they feel that they merit. So I don't really see them as self-hating. I see them more as being self-frustrated. Marie Golay managed to send in $2 without freezing the stream. That's good. On a previous stream, you said libertarianism was influenced by Satan or evil. Would you explain your argument? Certainly. If you look at the core notion of libertarianism, it's based on the concept of the sovereign individual. But the individual is not actually sovereign in any sense. And, there's a fundamental connection between the ideology of the sovereign individual and the non serviam of Satan. And so if you look at the hatred that a number of the significant early libertarians harbored for Christianity, it's very clear that libertarianism is as intrinsically full of lies and as fundamentally impractical, if not conceptually impossible, as communism, and inspired by much the same spiritual source. Thomas W. said, do you think monarchies will return to Europe? Most likely, just because historically that has been one of man's favored systems of rule. Democracy isn't working. Limited democracy isn't working. We're already back to oligarchy and occupation. How about in America after the U.S. collapses? America is not a place. In America. America is a people. It is a subset of the United States citizenry. Maybe some of them will want a king. I don't think so, though. Americans have never been too fond of kings. Wrath of the Monarch said, do you think there could be support for a phalangist-type party that offered a hard reset to a time before America got grabbled? Oh, almost certainly. Once the whole financial system collapses, all bets are off. Just about anything could happen. Hey Vox, I'm studying Freud in my philosophy homework right now. I can't stand him. He is a creep and a pervert. What is your personal take on him? My take on him is that he's a creep, a pervert, and a disingenuous liar. His philosophy is total nonsense. It doesn't work. There's virtually no one who goes in for Freudian therapy and actually improves. There are many, many, many people who go in for it and get markedly worse. So Freud did considerably more harm than good. Satoshi Bear sends $10. Thank you. Red Pill says, Vox, what's your thoughts on Professor Brown comparing Peterson's philosophy to Feuerbach? I don't know enough about Feuerbach to have an opinion. Thanks and God bless. Likewise. Hey Vox, wish you could see this. My 2-year-old has the phone up to her ear like she's talking to you during the stream. Can you shout out to Mackenzie and Madison? Well, I'm not going to do shout outs because that's a good way to get yourself set up for things, but I'm glad to hear that that you're getting your kids, that you want to get your kids off on the right path. I wouldn't suggest, these are fairly adult topics. I really wouldn't suggest that you, I don't know, actually I'm kind of torn because on the one hand, I genuinely don't think that it's particularly good for kids to be showered in adult material, adult in the actual sense, not in the sense that the euphemistic sense. But then again, we all grew up with Walter Cronkite in the background all the time. So anyhow, um, but I'm glad that I'm glad you're doing your part. The future belongs to those who show up for it. Mackenzie and Madison are clearly part of the future, and you showed up. Congratulations. Lionshare Logo says, thank you for bringing tremendous clarity. May he give you an enlarged heart for an increased capacity for his wisdom to flow through. Thanks. I think that's an interesting way of putting it. But I'm absolutely in favor of all the wisdom I can handle and more. I have to admit, you need to be cautious when praying for knowledge, because God does answer those prayers, but you may not like what you learn. Duralex Sedlex says, why kneel to any king but the King of Kings? Well, if it's a choice between kneeling to a king and kneeling to a foreign oligarchy, the king sounds pretty good, doesn't it? Sean Paul Corcoran says, thanks for the Darkstream. Thanks also for unauthorized.tv. You mentioned book subscription. Do we email you at Gmail to show interest? Yes, but what we're talking about is a specific type of subscription. We're talking about a subscription to these leather-bound books that we're planning to do. I think what we'd probably do is something on the order of a $50 subscription every month that would provide you with a new leather-bound book every other month. The books run about $100, but I think that 12 books a year is too many. What we're looking at doing first, we were just discussing this today, and what we're looking at doing first after we get the Junior Classics out is getting the 10 books of There Will Be War, both in regular hardcovers as well as leather-bound hardcovers. So this is interesting. In Deuteronomy, God tells Israel that when they want a king, he can't be a foreigner. Yet God doesn't want people to be ruled over by foreign nations. Have you guys begun shooting Rebels Run yet? No. We're still working on the script and so forth. Welcome, Satoshi Bear, or in this case, I think welcome back. Sam says, be careful to who you pray to. Absolutely. That's absolutely vital. Don't get suckered in by when people talk about God. Whenever they talk about God, the first question that you ask is, which God? Whose God? It's always very important. Especially when you see people trying to talk about either some sort of ecumenicism, or if they're talking about Judeo-Christianity. Anytime you hear, all gods are one, be wary. Skullman says, I finished reading the Silmarillion today, and I think it's better than Fellowship and Return, but not quite as good as Two Towers. I totally disagree with you. I also think Morgoth is a better villain than Sauron. Well, Morgoth is. Morgoth is much more powerful, and he's a much higher order of being. Sauron was just one of his lieutenants, and was, considerably less powerful. But to me, that Silmarillion read more like a history book as opposed to a novel. Travi, what are conservatives even conserving at this point? They're such wusses trying to gain acceptance from people who only want to push their globalist agenda. That's correct. I don't know. Tim observes something I've observed. This thing with Biden's son reads like a page out of SJW's Always Lie. The projection is unreal. Absolutely. Whenever you see them accusing whenever you see SJWs accusing others of something, your first thought should be, well, now I know where to look. Where will Rebels Run be shot? We are going to shoot it in Georgia. Hey, Vox, something you wish you knew in your early 20s? I wish I knew that wealth and fame are destructive traps. You know, and it wasn't like Asparagus Bear said, Vox, we had a friend die from suicide last year. What do you think happens to the souls of people who die this way? I don't know. I know that the Catholic Church teaches that suicides are damned, but I don't think that that's necessarily true. You know, technically, it is suicide to lay down your life for another. But that is very highly praised in the Bible, and it can be not unreasonably argued that, you know, Jesus allowed himself to be killed. Is that a suicide? I mean, not really, but it's close enough that I find it very, very difficult to assume, and it is only assumption, that a suicide is necessarily damned. God knows the human heart. We know this. And so only he can judge in those situations, in my opinion. What would anyone recommend to read for an 18-year-old atheist looking to shake off atheism? I would recommend that they read The Irrational Atheist. If nothing else, they might be too embarrassed to call themselves an atheist after that. Is it worth reading anything from Daniel Kahneman? I don't know. I don't think he's the one who wrote about the Spanish Inquisition. If he's not the guy who wrote about... No, he's not. I don't think so. I don't think so. Submitted to Christ says, have you or will you be reading Snowden's book? No, I have no intention of reading that at all. Wrangler Star sends $5. Thank you. Do you have the same problems with Trump as you do with conservatism? Not yet. I mean, Trump, in my opinion, has been the best president that we have had since Andrew Jackson. He hasn't been perfect. He hasn't proved himself up to the immense task that he faces. But the fact that he may not be capable of the Herculean challenges that he faces does not make him a bad man or a bad president. He has done more to drain the swamp than people have any right to expect. And for all of his martial rhetoric, he has kept the United States out of war. Now, he hasn't brought back the troops like some of us would have liked, but he never said he was going to bring all the troops back. He did say that he wasn't going to get us into more unnecessary wars, and he's delivered on that. Could he be a lot better on immigration and nationalism in general? Of course, but he's not a nationalist. He's always been a civic nationalist. You know? So, you know, the man does actually have some principles, unlike the conservative establishment. Vox, do you have a need for locals around Georgia for the movie? Probably. We'll be letting people know, definitely. Welcome, Callista Bear. Are Jehovah's Witnesses bad? I don't think that they are necessarily bad people, but I think that they are fundamentally wrong. I don't think that they are Orthodox Christians. I don't know if they are Christians at all. And we got some good news here from the Big Bear. He says, the documentary is going great. Enjoying the stream. Don't want to distract topic. Just checking in. Very happy to hear that. You know, this is a big step forward for unauthorized that we're taking. And somebody asked, are the shows going to be shown live? No, they're not. But they are all going to be filmed, and a special is going to be created from the four of them, and as is the documentary. And so you'll get, if you're a subscriber to Unauthorized, you'll get it. If you want to get one of the 250 limited edition signed DVDs that will include the special and the documentary, as well as some additional live footage and whatnot, you can pick up a copy at archavencomics.com. I think there are about 120 left, something like that. And once the 250 are gone, they're gone. That's all we're doing. So, yeah, Alexius points out that also in Orthodoxy, suicide is absolutely forbidden. I understand that. I'm not arguing with those teachings. I know what those teachings are. I'm just pointing out that those are church teachings as opposed to biblical teachings. Stacy Barrera says, I'm going to see Baby Metal in Seattle on October 16th, and I'm super excited and just wanted to share that. Wish you could run in the circle pit with us. Hey, have a great time. I've seen them live, and they're fantastic. They're absolutely fantastic. Of course, it's tragic that that 158 is gone. It's a pity that Yui's no longer involved. I was fortunate enough to be at a show where 158 was playing, and he was a lot of fun. I've very seldom seen any guitarist just look happier to be playing on stage than him. If you like Taleb, you like Kahneman. Okay, I probably will like him then. Why is the Irrational Atheist Kindle $11.99? You'd be eligible for a 70% royalty at a $9.99 price point and make more money also. Well, you'd have to ask the publisher. I'm not the publisher. We publish the audiobook, but the Kindle and print books are published by Ben Bella Books. Keep in mind, I was a published writer for many years before we founded Castalia House. Have you gotten around to watching Il Gattopardo yet? No, I haven't. GMB Catastrophe obviously didn't understand what I was saying. He said, that's going a bit far. Andrew Jackson would have found a way to get out from under the boot of international Judea. I said that he was the best president since Andrew Jackson. I didn't say he was a better president than Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson did the equivalent of getting rid of the then Fed. Obviously, Donald Trump has not done anything like that. Any thoughts who you would support in 2024? Yes, I would like to see the God Emperor Donald Trump, the second of his name. You said Disturbed was. I said Disturbed is one of my favorite bands. Yeah, I know that Dave Draymond is a liberal small hat. No, I don't have a problem with that. I like the music. I like his voice. He's an excellent lyricist and a really good vocalist too. Tucker Carlson would not be on my short list. Oh, okay. I know who Kahneman is. Um, Yossarian points out Kahneman is one of the people that figured out consumers don't consume in a rational fashion. He won the Nobel Prize in economics, even though he's a psychologist. Yeah, it's kind of funny. I mean, I figured that out on my own too. I just didn't write a paper about it. It's not really that difficult. That's the one thing that always frustrated me about game theory is because as much as I enjoyed it and found it interesting, it was very clear that it doesn't actually explain daily behavior. Leo Glazer said, without the punishment of hell for suicide, how do you discourage it? I don't think that you need to discourage it. Most people want to live. There's a certain amount of inertia to life, and you know, very few animals commit suicide. PFO Dynamite points out that conservatives even look like punching bags. Some of them do, most certainly. PFO Dynamite does not care for holidays. See, I love holidays. I think they're great. And it's one of the things I enjoy about living in a Catholic area is that they have all kinds of holidays. It took us a while to figure out. You know, we kept like going out to go to the store and going, wow, there's not much traffic today. Wow, there's not much traffic in the parking lot. Hey, the stores are closed. Yeah. But is either wealth or fame an inherently destructive trap? They appear to be, yes. Is every individual person not simply... Oh, don't give me this libertarian... Every individual... Anytime I hear... I mean, at this point... No, understand, I'm a former libertarian. I get it, okay? But I've learned that anytime anybody uses a phrase, every individual person, they're going to say something that is not very intellectually defensible. Is every individual person not simply responsible for how they, as an individual, really doubling down there, deal with or handle wealth or fame? It has nothing to do with that. That's like saying, is cancer inherently bad? Isn't every individual person not simply responsible for how they, as an individual, deal with cancer or sepsis? You know, wealth or fame, or both together, will destroy you if you're not careful. I've seen it happen again and again and again. Look, things don't work the world does not work the way that most people think it does. You know, you can only get to a certain level before you need to be completely dependent upon other people. And this is true at a fairly low level. You know, I couldn't get even to this very small level of success and fame that I have with the books and the YouTube and the subscribers and all this sort of thing without the help of hundreds of people. Imagine how much help and assistance you have to reach the level of a Justin Timberlake. Now, you don't get there on the basis of your fantabulous individual talents. There are absolutely beautiful, fairly intelligent women who will never ever even get 30 seconds in a major Hollywood film, where less intelligent, less attractive, less, did I say talented already? Anyhow, just their inferiors will have much better careers because they've been chosen, blessed, anointed, picked, paid the price, whatever. You're not going to get the assistance of the people that you need to get assistance from to get to that, ridiculous level. And there's usually some form of price attached to that, And I'm not just talking about like the spiritual side, although I believe that there's an element there as well. But just the number of compromises that you have to make, even at a very low level. And I mean, I'm talking about a really stupid level. Like, for example, when we were working on Rebel Moon Revolution, the head lawyer called me up and wanted to discuss the color of the lasers in the game. I said, "You're a lawyer. First of all, the game is in pre-alpha. We haven't decided on anything yet. These don't have any textures on them. That's just a single color. And why are we even having this conversation?" Now think about if something that trivial and unimportant needs to be approved by somebody at that level. You really think that anybody is going to get anywhere? That's why shows like American Idol were so popular. Oh, those are totally rigged. They're absolutely rigged. Why? Because those are basically all they're doing is deciding which person they want to. They're basically doing a little bit of public market testing people that they've already picked as possible stars. So, I mean, think about why do people keep getting opportunities to fail over and over again? You realize Kathleen Kennedy, even though she's been totally replaced as the head of the Star Wars, movies, she still has a job. She's still going to be given the chance to produce, many, many massive movies, despite the fact that she clearly can't do it. She's clearly failed completely. Robert Dunn says, "I apologize if I'm veering into agitator territory, but come on, you do not contract wealth fame like a disease. So, what does that have to do with it?" No, my cancer, no. See, this is why people don't like to argue with you. Because you say stupid things like, it's a specious argument against my point. No, it's not specious at all. It's absolutely relevant. How you contract these things has nothing to do with the analogy. Yes, you pursue wealth, you pursue fine. Let's say it's like a venereal disease. You pursue venereal diseases. You cannot get it without actively pursuing something. In fact, you're more likely to get a venereal disease by pursuing sex than you are to get, wealth and fame by pursuing whatever aspect of that you're pursuing. I mean, when somebody, people very seldom say, I'm pursuing wealth and fame, they usually say, well, I want to be a rock star. I want to have I want to write a number one bestseller, blah, 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 right? And then wealth and fame may come with it, just like a venereal disease may come with sex. But it still has the strong possibility of destroying you, destroying your family, destroying your children. You know, it's dangerous. You know, is it absolutely fatal? No. Neither is cancer or venereal disease. You know, it presents significant challenges that very, very few people know or understand until it's too late. You know, look at Justin Bieber. Does he look like he's living a good life? You know, he's like weeping in public and addicted to drugs. Look at Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson spent decades desperately pursuing power and desperately trying to sell out. And now that he finally has, where has he ended up? On drugs and in rehab. You know, so, I mean, if you want to pursue those things and learn this for yourself, go ahead. But practically anyone who happens to know much about it understands that there are downsides. I'm not saying that the downsides are necessarily worse than, say, oh, I don't know, poverty. It is certainly more pleasant to be rich and have the problems of rich people than it is to be poor and have the problems of poor people. But a lot of times, when you talk to very rich people, and believe me, I have known a number of very rich people, they talk very affectionately and nostalgically of the days before they were rich. I mean, do you have any idea how difficult it is to not be able to trust anyone that you talk to? Have you noticed how many people who are famous only associate with either people who are equally famous or people that they knew before they became famous? You know, look at the issues that Owen Benjamin had when he would befriend people and then find out that they, you know, wanted to police him or control him somehow. You know, it's my perspective. You're certainly welcome to disagree with it. You're certainly welcome to pursue it and try to learn it for yourself if you want. Leo Glazer said, wouldn't you say we need to work on lowering the suicide rate? Respectfully disagree on your animal point. Most animals aren't gay or trans either. Well, I mean, I would say that a lot more of them are gay. I don't think any of them are trans, but no, I don't think that we need to work on lowering the suicide rate particularly. I think that if you want to lower the suicide rate, get rid of the opioids. You know, make the culture a Christian culture. You know, but just trying to focus on it and turning to all this therapeutic nonsense and psychology and whatnot, it's not going to work. It's not going to work at all. Iamblicus 2 says, I've been listening to an unhealthy amount of the Kurgan. Apparently, if I'm not a pre-Vatican II Catholic and do not have at least 16 Saracen scalps, then I'm a heretic with a doomed soul for eternity. Can you please disavow the Kurgan? Of course I'm not going to disavow the Kurgan. I don't disavow anyone. Especially not on demand. So I would encourage you to go get your scalps. You know? All right. Well, I think that we have covered everything that I meant to cover. I apologize if I happen to miss any super chats, but if I did, I will get to them tomorrow. Have a good. No, Dr. Azue says, I'm more likely to get Vox Day if I pursue fame. No, you're not. I said that that's. Oh, you're more likely to get. Okay. Sorry, I didn't see that joke. Anyhow, but that's all we've got. So have a good evening. Thanks for tuning in. Let's all hope that the Big Bears first show goes great tomorrow night. If you're going to be there, have a wonderful time. And I will see you tomorrow at the Darkstream. This is the Darkstream. I'm Vox Day.